Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining me, or if you're going to join me, thank you in advance. And I'm just going to start off by saying this is going to be a podcast as well, so I'm going to do my little introduction. If anybody listens to my podcast too, you'll recognize this. Hi, this is Tom Soane, and welcome to another episode of The Anonymous Landlord. And today I'm going to give you a warning about rent to rent. How you can avoid losing tons of money, how you can avoid screwing it up, and what's going to happen to the rent-to-rent market in the future, in my opinion. This is what I think is going to happen anyway. So let's crack on with it, shall we? Now, first of all, rent-to-rent is a bit of a buzz phrase at the moment. Training companies are using it to the death to sell property investors the dream. Anybody who wants to make a bit of profit, you can go and do these training courses and spend loads of money and learn how to do rent-to-rent deals. And really, it's being sold as making profit from property without having any money or without having much money, and it's definitely. So you never actually own the property, but you can make money from it. But it's a bit of a trap unless you get it absolutely bang on. So I want to do a few things with you this morning. Number one, I'm going to give you a few harsh and blunt warnings about rent to rent as a property investment strategy. Number two, I'm going to give you a guide on how you can calculate it properly, make sure you're getting the right rent-to-rent deals, and how you can get the whole rent-to-rent strategy spot on. I'll also give you my prediction as well for what is going to happen, in my opinion, for both owners, investors, and possibly tenants as well, with anybody who's looking to get into the rent-to-rent property investing world. So look, before I crack on with that, rent to rent, just very quickly, could also be called a lease option, depending on how you set it up. But effectively, you approach an owner of a property and you offer them a guaranteed rent for an example, up to 5 years. And then you, as the investor, you handle the management, you handle the maintenance, repairs, compliance, and all of those sorts of things. And then you should be reflecting those costs in your offer so that you make sure you make a bit of profit and you've got those costs covered. So that's basically a rent to rent. You rent something off one person and rent it out to another person. You take the little piece of profit on the top. Sounds awesome. And that's why people are spending thousands on training courses. And I'm not saying the training courses are bad, because rent to rent is a strategy. But people are spending thousands on these training courses, going into the training courses thinking that rent to rent is an easy way to make money. Do you know what I saw? I had a bloke, spoke to a guy the other day who's got a very small rent to rent portfolio that he wants to grow and he wants to build. And he's making about 150 quid, something like that, per property. I think some of them are maybe 170, 180. Some of them are more like 130, 140. But one of his tenants, he's only got a small portfolio of these rent-to-rent deals. And one of those tenants stopped paying rent. And this was just before lockdown. And there wasn't enough money coming in from the other couple of rent-to-rent deals to cover that rent. So he was losing something like £500 a month because he's in contract. He's in contract with the owner of the property to guarantee that rent. Now, this is a very common issue. I'm seeing so many people that are making just little bits of profit here and there on rent-to-rent deals, but not actually calculating them correctly. And do you know what? I also spoke to a guy, sorry to just quickly jump off topic, but I also spoke to another guy who did a rent-to-rent deal where he was going to rent it out as a holiday let. Now, if you get those right, they're really good deals. But he got some good bookings to start with, thought it was all going well, and then that property or that area went into a bit of an off-season, bit of an off-peak season. And so he started losing money bad because he was giving that landlord a decent amount of money every month and then not making enough money on bookings to make any profit or even to cover the cost. So there are a few stories like that, and I'm hearing more and more and more stories. I'm speaking to other property investors, other developers, other agents as well, and there seems to be a bit of a, bit of a warning going around at the moment about rent to rent. So this is why I wanted to do this as well. So look, let me just also remind everybody that there are successful people with rent to rent. There are people making good profit every single month from rent to rent. And hey, if you do rent to rent, are you involved in rent to rent? Let me know. Have you got any rent to rent deals that you've done? Pop a comment below and let me know. And if you're really brave, let me know how much profit you make on each one. That would be really helpful. And cheers for everyone that's joining, by the way. And thanks very much for clicking the like buttons and the heart buttons. I love all that. It just comes up flashing on my screen. So whenever you do it, do more of it. I love it. Anyway, so let me start off with a few warnings now. And if you're, thank you very much, if you're interested in, oh, by the way, if anyone's listening to this on the podcast and you're wondering what the hell I'm talking about, flashing up like buttons and hearts and stuff, then I'm doing this also as a Facebook Live. So depending on when you listen to this. Right, so warnings. Now, this is a real important part, and I really want everybody to pay attention here. And let me know if you have suffered anything with rent-to-rent deals, or you're thinking about getting into rent-to-rent. To remember, first of all, you are effectively becoming a letting agent and a tenant. Now, that sounds easy enough if you're making a profit on the top, but you're also getting into a contract which is going to be classed as a business agreement. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, if you're in a standard consumer agreement, just a regular person, non-business entity, then if you have to go to court for any reason, you get a lot of leniency because you're just a human being, just a person. Whereas if you're in a business agreement, the judge will quite literally just go, tough luck. You're a business, tough luck. So that means we lose a lot of court protection as a business unless you have the right protection in place yourself, which I'm going to give you in a second. You're also taking on a lot of the owner's responsibilities of that property without actually owning that property. So it's a real high risk until really you've got a lot of rent-to-rent property investment deals. Now, if you start building up a really big portfolio of rent-to-rent property deals, that's when you can really start making some good profit. You can offset profits from these properties against any risks with other properties. You might have properties where, let's say you've got 20 properties and they're all making you £200 each, right? You're making about £4,000 a month, which means you can lose a few little rents now and again from tenants that struggle to pay those rents. So you have to offset that, and I'll give you a bit more information about that in a second. The other thing is as well, yes, it's high risk. Yes, you need a lot of these to make any profit, but you also never actually own an asset. And if anybody's read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, who's read Rich Dad, Poor Dad? Has anyone read that? I'd love to know, actually. Drop your comments. I've read that, and I think that's kind of where my investment brain really started kicking off. But with a rent-to-rent deal, you're never actually owning the asset other than the value of that contract, which isn't very much when you think about the level of risk. And, oh, you're reading that at the moment, Shelley. Nice one. You'll love it. When you get to the end of it, you'll change the way you think about investing, I promise. But yeah, you never really own the asset other than the value of the contract, which you only own for a period of time. And there is also a lot of risk involved. So really, if you think about it, if you've got a rent-to-rent property and you're making, say, I don't know, profits of £1,000 a year or £1,500 a year, then what is the real value of that property? And Richard's read the book, Started Your Journey at the start of this year. It's awesome, isn't it? It just changes the way you think about things. Anyway, so there are a few risks, big risks. Imagine that. If you've got a portfolio of 10 rent-to-rent properties that you've got deals agreed with the owners, and then some of those tenants stop paying rent, you've still got to make that payment to the landlord. And there's going to be some problems with that, I promise you. So then you've got training companies. Now, training companies are going to sell to you on the basis that rent-to-rent property deals are easy to find, easy to do, and an easy way to make profit. Now, you and I both know that making profit easily is not possible. Well, no, maybe not impossible, but it's really hard to make easy money, right? And we all have to work hard. We have to be clever. We have to be smart with our money. If it was easy, then everyone would be doing it. And there's a reason why the top investors and the top property investors in the country don't really get into rent to rent. You'll always find that the easy ways to make money are actually the hard ways to make money because they've got so much risk. Now, what you'll find with the training companies is, and by the way, this is fine. I'm not saying don't do the training. The training companies are fine. They will teach you how to do rent to rent, but there isn't an easy way to do it. And there are certain percentage of people that have succeeded with it. And I'd love to hear from you if you have succeeded in rent to rent and making good profits, more profits than you thought you might make, perhaps. But there's not many people that have really made it in rent to rent. I know, or there's not many as a percentage of the number of people that go for it. I know so many people that go around all the agents, go around all the properties and landlords trying to offer rent to rent deals or lease options, but never really get them accepted or never get them accepted at any rate or in any time frame that's going to generate a good yield. So yes, look, these are my warnings, really. You don't own the asset. There's not really a high success rate. There is a success rate, but it's not a high success rate. And you never actually own the asset other than the value of that contract for the period of time that you are agreed into. And similarly, there's not a great profit. Surely, would you rather, and I'd like to hear from you, would you rather own the property and make the same profits that you could make or not own it? There you go. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of ways to get it right. If you are interested in getting into rent to rent, now I don't do rent to rent myself. My letting agent kind of does, but I don't. I don't really like it personally. Unless it's an amazing deal that comes along I can't miss out on, of course. But a couple of ways to get it right. First of all, if you are going to get into rent to rent deals, then see if you can attach a purchase option to the rent to rent deals, because a purchase option is a really good way to turn that rent to rent contract into an asset. And now all of a sudden, yes, you're going to make 100, 150, whatever pounds per month, but now you're going to also get that asset, and that contract of a purchase option is also an asset in itself. You can sell the contract of a purchase option around. I'll give you a perfect example, actually. I had a deal. I didn't actually get the deal done in the end because the owner pulled out. Fair enough, it happens. But I'd made an offer to a owner for a lease purchase option, which is where I rent the property from that person for 5 years, and we agree a purchase price now in order for me to be able to buy it at that pre-agreed price in the future. Now, that didn't come off, but I thought I was getting that deal, and I had also pre-agreed to sell that purchase option to another investor who wanted it. So I was immediately going to make money, not just from that, from the lease option or the rent to rent. I was also going to make immediate profit from agreeing that purchase option too. So, it's a really good way to turn that lease option or rent to rent deal into an actual asset that you will own. Now, the second thing I want to tell you is to calculate it perfectly from the start. Remember, rent to rent is a high risk strategy. So if you calculate it properly from the start, and hello everyone that's joining me. By the way, if you've just joined me, give me a couple of likes or love hearts or whatever, because they just flash up on my screen and it looks awesome. But it also lets me know that everybody's there and actively listening. So calculate it perfectly from the start. Thank you very much. Straight away, look. Calculate it perfectly from the start. I'm going to give you a calculation in a second once I've given you these little tips on getting it right. The next tip I want to give you is be creative with it. You can be creative, and thank you very much, by the way. Rent to serviced accommodation, by the way. Rent to HMO, house of multiple occupancy. Rent to commercial lets. All of those ways are more creative ways of making more profit, and the more profit you can make, the more you can mitigate your risk against things like tenants not paying rent or things going wrong. Do you know what? I've just remembered there was a guy who did a rent-to-rent deal, 5-year rent-to-rent deal. Was going to make about 100 and I can't remember what it was now. I think it was a couple £100 a month profit. Brilliant deal. And in something like month 3, the boiler went bust and he had to replace the boiler. Ow. Ugh. Now, there are some deals, by the way, that you can agree certain things that the owners will still take responsibility for. But that would normally offset against profits that you can make for it. Anyway, so be creative. There are other ways to do rent-to-rent deals, but you must look for location, demand, and activity. Never compromise on that. Never just look at a deal and you know that the rent value is £1,000 and you think, and the owner's accepted 700 or 650, then that's great for the numbers. But if it's a terrible location, low demand, and not much activity in that area, then you might just well take on a dud. And you don't want to do that. So let me give you a calculation now. And I'll try and make this as simple as I can. If you've got a property, let's say you've got a house, and this is in my area. So if you're in other parts of the country, just work it out relative to your rent values and stuff. So first of all, if you've got a full rent valuation of about, say, £1,000 a month, then you'll need to calculate a minimum of 10% for maintenance and repair, a minimum 10%. So on this example, £100 a month for maintenance and repair. Remember, you've got to do things like gas safety certificates, EPCs, electrical installation condition reports. You've got to do all the different pieces of compliance that you must keep up, and that all costs money. Then there's general repairs. Now, luckily, I've got a pretty decent letting agent, so I can see exactly what repairs tend to need to be done on an annual basis and what costs are attached to them. So, I work out for my own rentals, I work out a minimum 10% purely just for maintenance and repair. Now, bear in mind, that doesn't include the major stuff. If a boiler goes bust or, something terrible happens to the property, that doesn't include that. That will just be a one-off ad hoc cost that you need to remember and be aware of. And thank you so much for all these bloody hearts. You should see my screen right now. It just flies up and floats around. It's brilliant. And by the way, I did say earlier on, is anybody in rent-to-rent investing? Is anybody trying to get into rent-to-rent investing? Has anybody done any courses on rent-to-rent investing? Anyway, back to my, shock. I've digressed. I know. Anyway, so your full rent value is £1,000. You must make a minimum allocation of 10% of that rent for maintenance and repair. Doesn't include the major stuff. Then you have to allocate, or I would allocate, another 10% for your rent risk. It's actually just a little bit less than 10%. But what you need to protect yourself against is if that tenant doesn't pay rent once every year, then you have enough money in your rent risk pot to cover it. So 10% of your £1,000 is another £100. So you're going to bring into that pot £1,200 a year, which covers the cost of your tenant if they can't pay the rent for 1 year. Now, that shouldn't happen. If that doesn't happen and you've done the correct checks on the tenant, then you make that as additional profit. So that's fantastic. And then you want to set your own yield targets. Now, for me, I don't want to take any less than 15% on any money that I ever spend or anything that I ever invest in. I want a minimum of 15% per year, every year, without fail. Now, in that instance, I want to make a minimum of £150 per month in pure profit. If I do that, I'm happy. And then that gives my offer to the landlord of £650 guaranteed rent for 5 years without fail. So the landlord knows, right, brilliant. I know I'm going to get £650 a month rent. I know I'm going to have everything covered. I know I'm not going to have to chase rent. I'm not going to have to sort out maintenance. I'm not going to have to manage it. I'm not going to have to go round to the property at 2 o'clock in the morning because the tenants locked themselves out. I'm not going to do anything like that. I'm not going to have to get involved. I just get my $650 a month, and Mr. and Mrs. Property Investor just take care of the rest. Now, that's a good deal. Let me just repeat that. £1,000 a month rent. Let's just say the rent value, the full rent value is £1,000 a month. You must allocate 10% for maintenance and repairs. You must do that. Non-negotiable. You must allocate a further 10% for rent risk, meaning if your tenant misses one rent payment per year, you're covered. You must make a minimum of 15% profit, or less if you're comfortable making less. For me, it's 15%. You must make 15% minimum, and therefore that will give you your offer. And that deal that I just proposed there is a reasonable deal. But if you've only got the one, that's pretty risky. And it will mean that if you lose rent for a month, you lose your profits, right? So look, as you know, if you find any deals and you want to do some deals, let me know. I do offer discovery calls, as everybody knows. They're totally free. And it's a discovery for you so that you can discover solutions and advice and tips and my knowledge or anything like that. And it's a discovery for me because then I can discover people's challenges, people's questions, people's problems. And then I can share it with everybody and all my following and all my listeners. So it really helps everybody. It helps me create these videos. So if you've got challenges that you want to overcome, if you've got fears and strategies you want to learn, or you want to get anything, learn how to get it right, book a discovery call with me. Just pop me a message through Facebook. If you book that discovery call, then we can have a good 30-minute chat and we can all help each other. And that helps other people too. Now, what's going to happen to rent in the future? Well, personally, I think landlords are going to see what everybody's doing and get a bit greedy themselves. Think about it. If you're making a couple of £100 profit every month from a landlord's property and you never own the property, then, well, if it was me, I'd be thinking, well, hang on a minute, I want that couple of £100 a month profit, right? So I do think that at some point there are going to be a percentage of those landlords that see what's happening, maybe get a bit greedy. Oh, greedy's the wrong word. Maybe change their mind and then cut you out. I think that's going to happen a lot more than it is currently. I think too many people are going to jump into this, especially now. I'm seeing so many adverts for training courses on rent to rent. It's phenomenal. Now, like I say, rent to rent is a valid property investment strategy. I'm not cutting it or slating it or whatever. I'm trying to warn everybody that if you're going to get into property and you're going to get into rent to rent property investing, then it is a minefield. It's risky. And yes, you can make a little bit of profit. For me personally, I think I can make better profit in other ways. So look, a lot of people are going to jump into this for a quick and easy win, but it's not a quick and easy win, and it will fail if you don't get it right. And if it fails, this is where you're even more at risk, because if you fail this, then not only you screw up and you lose money, but landlords lose money too. They get screwed, and tenants, they fall into a screwed category because they then have higher risk themselves because they're technically renting from you, Mr. and Mrs. Investor. But also, the other thing is that what's going to happen with this in the future, training companies are going to make a lot of money out of this because, look, we're all just human beings. If someone says to us there's a quick and easy way to make money, then that's going to get our attention. We're just humans. That's the way the world works. Someone says to you, here you go, here's a way for you to make £200 a month without having any money yourself, or without ever owning a property, or without very much money at all, then you're going to really listen to that. And hi, Izzy, nice to see you again. Thank you very much for your comment, by the way. But yeah, so training companies are going to get rich, and then sourcing agents are going to make a lot of money out of this, because there are going to be people that go around the country, especially at the moment with what's going on in the world. There are going to be people that go around the country doing rent-to-rent deals and then selling them on to you as the investor. They take no risk. They get paid. You then get a little bit of profit, but you take on all that risk. And it's madness. So, yeah, there are going to be people that make a lot of money. And again, I want to repeat, there are rent-to-rent investors that are making money. But it is a small percentage out of the massive volume of people that are currently trying to do it. It's also going to become very heavily regulated. So if you are a rent-to-rent investor right now, you are about to get hit, absolutely battered with regulation. I promise you. There's something coming in called ROPA, which is the regulation of property agents. And that means that anybody who has any dealings with a tenancy, tenant and rental property, that sort of stuff, any dealings will need to be qualified. And the general message that I'm hearing at the moment is that's going to be a technical level 3 qualification, which is reasonably tough to get. Actually, they actually recommend taking an 18-month course for that. So, you know what? If you want to get into that deal, you better make sure you get it right. You better make sure you get those qualifications. The compliance that you have to take on is phenomenal. Do you know there's 178 different pieces of legislation that landlords must know and must follow to be compliant in the current lettings world? Mind-blowing. And then if you're a rent-to-rent investor, you take on all of that. So look, there are good rent-to-rent deals out there. Of course they are. If there weren't, then it wouldn't be a strategy. But it only works for the people that do it right. And if you do it right, you'll make money. I promise you that. You will make profit if you do it correctly. Don't focus. Here's my real top advice. Don't focus on making tons of profit on one property deal. Focus on making lots and lots of little bits of profit and growing it up. Spread that risk across multiple properties. And this is whether you're doing rent to rent, buy to let, flips, whatever. Doesn't matter. Just make sure that you are doing every single property investment you do makes the right calculation, make the right investment, make the right profit. So do lots of them. Don't expect massive amounts of profit from one property. And do good deals with good contracts and then keep doing them. There's a little term, I'm going to do this piece on it actually, called, there's a little term called practice makes perfect, which is absolute rubbish. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. If you keep on practicing the wrong thing over and over and over and over again, it doesn't become perfect. It becomes permanent. You'll permanently do the wrong thing. So you need to do practice to become permanent. So keep doing these deals. You get a good contract and you haven't been greedy. You've just made sure you've got the right profit. You've calculated it right. You've got the right protection against your risk. Keep doing it. Keep doing it and keep doing it. Now, remember, it's all about numbers, especially with rent to rent. Now, of course, you have to do your due diligence in terms of demand, location, activity, and so on. But you have to make sure the numbers are correct. That's even more important than ever. And be prepared. Take note of this one. Be prepared to lose money until you have enough property deals or rent-to-rent property deals to make profit. Because remember, it's still investing. And losing money is okay if you're investing in that property, right? It is still property investment, right? It's not free stuff here. We're not giving no one's giving anything to you for free. No one woke up this morning and thought, do you know what? I'm going to make somebody else rich today. No, it doesn't happen. You've got to do it for yourself and you've got to get it right. It is property investing. So be prepared to lose money, but don't worry about losing money. If you've done everything else I've said today, and you've calculated the risk and you've calculated your profits and your protection for the future. And do not expect something for nothing. So thank you very much for joining me on all of that. And do you know what? This is one more thing, isn't it? And we'll just keep chipping away and chipping away and chipping away at all of these single individual things that you need to do to make sure that you can be the best version of yourself. Now, if you remember this is my favorite phrase, because to be the best version of yourself at one thing, and in this instance, it's rent-to-rent deals, you have to be the best version of yourself at everything you do. And I heard someone, Mark Lloyd, if you listen to his podcast, it's brilliant. Mark Lloyd said, anything we do is the same as everything we do. And that's what I mean. To be the best version of yourself at one thing, you've got to be the best version of yourself at everything you do. So I hope this helps. And if it did help, please share this round. I'd love other people to learn to get this right. I probably should have said that at the beginning. But do share this round because I think this is helpful for people to know that want to get into property investment. But until I speak to you next time, my name is Tom Soane, and this is The Anonymous Landlord.